Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Chief Rankin. I'm the ACM DCO Branch Chief. More acronyms for you. Army Capability Manager. Used to be called TICM back in the day. Defensive Cyber Operations, another acronym. I'm joined here with my deputy, Mr. Dave Smith, and also Colonel Trevino. He's with Army ID2, Integration Data Division with our Cyber. And what we're going to discuss today is how can we leverage our lightweight analytic platform through the tactical data platform, which is coming through Echelon, from basically tactical edge through division and corps and up. But before I do so, I wanted to explain what ACM does, because a lot of people, there's going to be 2 or 3 presenters from ACM during this next 2 days. We actually work on new and emerging technologies that are actually based on capability needs from the warfighter that we actually use as requirements. So basically all we do as ACM is work on the requirements. Then that goes through the program manager, and from the program manager it is fleshed out and goes to acquisition, and that's how a lot of times these new and emerging technologies gets put in the force for the Army 2030 and 2040. We actually fall under CDID, which is the Capability Development and Integration Directorate. Just a plug out, CDID has a booth, so go visit them at booth R1235. Yeah, there's a plug for you. So our top priorities, as stated here, I'm just going to list just a few of them. Not all of them, but we want to maintain user touch points to ensure we develop capabilities that work through operational assessments, adversarial assessments, and developmental testing. When we do these things, this is what we do to identify the capability needs when we do these assessments. In fact, right now, as we speak, our DCO tools are actually going through an adversarial assessment right now at the GCC right next door at the Georgia Cyber Center. And we're also going to do experimentation or exercises, and Colonel Trevino will speak on that later, because he's actually done a few exercises with Valiant Shield and Project Convergence Capstone 4 and moving forward with 5. We're also a user advocate for .mil-PF. Everybody know what .mil-PF is? Another acronym. Gotta love the acronyms. So bottom line is we're going to do these capabilities for the operational force. We also work with the CCOE, the Cyber School Center of Excellence, with the schoolhouse to ensure mission capabilities and training as well, to train the force across all the forces in support of multi-domain operations. So we coordinate the .mil-PF developments, and we ensure capabilities remain integrated and support operational requirements based on these capability needs. Just give you an example. One of the good examples is our DDSM kit. Anybody with the Cyber Protection Brigade? Okay, so right now, back in the day, we had the old DDI kits. There were basically 3 stacks, about 130 pounds each, 105 pounds each, usually a 4-man carry. We've migrated because of capability needs and the requirements and emerging technology. We moved to a DDSM kit, which is more like a modular setup where it can go and doesn't have to go in the belly of the plane. Well, sometimes it does when we go Augusta Regional, but a lot of times when because the smaller planes don't take the overhead, but generally speaking, we can actually carry it as a carry-on rather than put it in the belly of the plane. Well, right now, we've actually, just to give you an example, we're working on version 1 Echo, and then version 2, just to give you an example of how through these capability needs and operational assessments and developmental testing, that's how we flush it out through ATEC and other services to get after the needs of the warfighter. CETA is part of 1 of 4, so we're 1 of 4 of the ACMs. So you understand, so you're going to have people speaking the next 2 days from tactical radios, network and services, and also electronic warfare. But we were at Cyber, and I'm actually joined I have one of my branches here. So under ACM, we have 4 different branches. Obviously, I'm the DCO branch chief, so that's defensive cyber. We have offensive cyber operations. Mr. Law used to be now he's our deputy civilian. We have Major Chava, who's with the PCTE. For those that with CBB, you understand with their range environments, that's critical as far as training the force with gunnery tables. And then we also have a newly developed information advantage. So those are the 4 branches that are under ACM Cyber, just to give you some background context. Now I'm just going to move into our actual portfolio for DCO so you understand before I go deep dive into our lightweight analytical capability. As you can see, I've actually broken down by core functions under maneuver and under DCO platforms. So this is our OV, our operational view. Primary users and our stakeholders are our Cyber Protection Brigade, National Guard, NetCom, Reserves, and the 11th Cyber Battalion. We also have the MDTFs as well, so the Multi-Domain Task Force and MDEPs. We got 3 stood up right now. We got 2 more coming. Anybody know where the 3 are located? You do? Okay, so one is in Jablam, Washington State. Number 2 is in Germany. Number 3 is in Hawaii. And then 4 and 5 is going to be in Carson and Liberty. I still got to say Bragg, but it's Liberty. But that's going to be in fiscal year 27 for the MDTFs. So what we've done is, by the core functions, we have the ability to outmaneuver our adversaries, ability to detect, deception, mission assurance. So with the detect, we can actively predict and hunt. So for DCO, we actually defend DODIN, so we don't secure DODIN like a CISP. So we do incident response, we do hunt forward missions, and that's where we actively detect. We also evaluate defensive postures. So all these core functions fall under the analytics, which we'll go into, which is the lightweight analytical platform. DCO tools, that's like a lot of times when you go on mission, you actually have a pre-configured tool suite as far as hunting tools. So that's where we get our PAL, like a product availability or authorized list. That's where that comes from. And this is for threat monitoring, user activity monitoring, threat emulation, and counter-infiltration, and FMA. So we have a vast portfolio. We have 9 programs of record. And concurrently, right now, we're working on 5 draft capability drops. In order, we're doing the LAP, which I'll talk in the next slide, which are a lightweight analytical platform that actually follows the old LEAP and LTAC. And then we're going to do SOAR, the SOAR CD, the Operational Technology CD, UAM, and FMA. So we have 5 concurrently going on right now. And all this supports Compos 1, 2, and 3. So right now, I'm going to focus on our cyber analytics. This is the LTAC and LEAP. So the difference between those two is that before I talk to this slide, I want to just give you some background context what the Tactical Data Platform is. It used to be called the Tactical Data Fabric. It's basically a centric capability for cloud and tactical edge nodes, and it's a unified warfighting model. It actually is combined with all joint combined C2 nodes, and it fuses, curates, and transforms data derived from both external and internal sources. And then secondly, I wanted to give you a background on what our cyber has done with their implementation plan. So they've done a data implementation plan. Their near-term vision was to share data across IT services across the Army. We also want to build it off the COTS system and baseline development, and then with the end state of it, having a repository at the big data platform, which is at the enterprise level. So for the Army, we call it Gabriel Nimbus. If any old Signal folks here, remember the data lake? So that's basically same as it's now called the Big Data Platform. So it gives you some interoperability aspects. And we're going to also ingest and store and have the bandwidth and visualize these multiple layers of cyber data from the big data platform to the tactical edge. So the vision was to move all this into one single integrated service-oriented information sharing environment. That's the whole concept of the Army Data Implementation Plan, to move across all echelons and enclaves, including NIPR, SIPR, and JWICs. And the objectives for the main objectives for the data implementation plan was to consolidate the data, support mission spaces, and create a standardized set of cyber analytics and applications. And most importantly, to provide mission command, making a suite of command and control apps. So that way, for the warfighter and for the commander, the commander's intent is not to just see the battle space, but see the IT space as a battle space. So like moving from left to right, we have our hosts and servers at the tactical edge. And we actually use the TDI that was mentioned earlier in the DCO platforms. You had GDP, TDI, and you had the DDSM. So at the tactical edge, we have the TDIs that are nested with the TSI stack. For the Signal folks, you understand the TSI stack is nested also with the sensitive but unclassified encrypted 10-gig pipe. So our TSI that has the LAP is nested with the TSI, with the TDI on the TSI stack. At the regional level, we'll have the GDP, the Garrison DCO platform, which is actually, we're working on version 4 right now. And that will be at the regional hub node nested with the RCCs and GCCs, the regional cyber centers. And then finally, at the enterprise level, I know, General, we were talking offline about the enterprise and how that's critical as how we can leverage the enterprise all the way from enterprise to the tactical edge. In the middle of the graphic, just to give you some context between LEAP and LTAC. So LEAP is actually the prototype. It was basically a non-containerized version. Once again, when we look at requirements, we have to look at it from a standpoint of what's the needs of right at this moment. Sometimes technology moves faster than we can keep up with. So sometimes we have to have technology at the moment that may not be the best solution, but is the current solution. So at the time, we had LEAP, which was a non-containerized prototype. And then we moved to the LTAC, which is a containerized version. So that gave us ability to get ahead of and keep up with technology and use the LEAP and nest it with the GDP version 4. So that's why you see both LEAP and LTAC. Eventually, LEAP will merge and combine into LTAC. It will be replaced eventually. So as you see from the graphics, when we use the log data from the Snowball and the deployable kits, this is the DDSMs, we can actually parse that data, the IOCs, the indicators of compromise, the malicious cyber activities, from the tactical edge through the SBU Echo 10-gig pipe. I know that's a shared network with like a lot of fires, AFATADs, and so on. But if you're able to parse that data and then take it from the repository here at the data lake or the BDP and parse it and ingest and push data, there's a way to do that. And Colonel Trevino can articulate that a little bit better. But that's just graphically showing how we can distribute that through distributed operations, how we can move that data, if any type of analytics that can be performed. So if we look at IOCs, when we see the IOCs, we can actually identify possibly like, advanced persistent threats, nation states, or we can actually look at, CVEs that cyber vulnerability exploitations that actually produce any type of TTPs, and we can do the analytics from there. At this level is usually going to be at the division and below level, and right now the TSI stack is at the brigade, but Big Army's moving it to the division echelon. So right now we're looking at leveraging on the .mil PF I mentioned, personnel, the 255 Sierras and 25 Deltas that can actually have the manpower to look at that and use the lightweight analytical platform, that tool, to do the analytics at the division level. So that's what we're looking at right now. At the tactical edge, they can push that data to the division level by parsing it. For further, besides all our operational assessments and adversarial assessments and development testing, we're actually looking at experimentation is really big on our radar right now, as mentioned in one of the priorities in the previous slide. So when we look at experimentation, we can actually, put it out in the field through exercises and look at, the compute bandwidth and any type of storage limitations. We can actually identify those. Right now, we've actually used, LAP was actually originally used in PCC 22. So it's been like 2 years now. So Project Convergence Capstone 22. We actually implemented it in 4 this past spring. I think we looked at it at Valiant Shield. Isn't that correct, Colonel Trevino? At Valiant Shield. That was this summer. And then we're going to actually use the LAP and exercise that tool through PCC 5, which will be at coming up in February, April timeframe, March, April. So with that said, I turn the floor to Colonel Trevino from our Cyber ID2 to discuss more on experimentation.
Howdy. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Trevino. Work for Army Cyber Integration Data Division, part of the Data Warfare Division at the headquarters at Army Cyber. So I've been charged to specifically talk about innovation, experimentation, and capability development in regards to how do you deploy a big data platform, or specifically a data platform, and make it operationally relevant. And so, got a couple talking points. I'll keep it within 5 minutes or less. With that being stated, Chief Rankin described what the ACM is responsible for doing, and the key critical component there is requirements. From the time a requirement is received to a capability being deployed or developed, we've already modernized and innovated to something else. So, how can we expedite the process of, I need an electric vehicle, to having an electric vehicle in my driveway that I can leverage or use for an operational purpose? That's kind of the charge that was asked of me, is find a way to move faster. So the first thing that we did was we latched onto a platform that we already somewhat knew was already part of a program of record. That was the big data platform. And then we asked the question, how does the experimentation that I'm currently leveraging through pilots, innovation, experimentation, design, testing, help me to inform the requirement so that we can either update the requirement to meet the new emerging requirement, or adapt so we can deploy a capability faster so that our current requirements can meet the operational need. With that being said, we're at the point now where in the experimentation, we are moving so fast that we're having the next challenge, which is now that we've identified the capability, a data platform, you're choosing, and I'm not being very specific on which data platform, we now have an operational need or a capability that's been assessed, been addressed. Experimentation has said, yes, the operational users actually value and want this through user acceptance testing. How do we then transition that back into a program of record that helps us to meet the requirement? It's a challenge. So at Army Cyber headquarters, we've been somewhat successful in moving out pretty fast to enable this. by latching on to a big data platform that in the cyber domain is familiar to the enterprise. For experimentation purposes, what we looked at was, how do I take that platform, move it to the edge? This is where I'm going to talk about 3 points: infrastructure, data, and operations. Infrastructure. I now need infrastructure to deploy in. Challenge. Where do I get the infrastructure from? Common term, people come to me and say, well, let's just rent it from the cloud. Great. First thing I comes up with is, where's your risk management framework for the infrastructure? Are you allowed to deploy that on my network? Great. Well, guess what I'm not going to leverage is I'm going to look at focusing on stuff that helps me to move faster. What helps me to move faster? Infrastructure that's already part of a program of record. So now I'm not focusing on acquiring new infrastructure. Yes, it is still a critical need. We do need it. But that's one of the useful experiences that we've had with the testing of the infrastructure for LTAC, Gabriel Nimbus, at the edge, TDP, lab, data fabric, whatever you want to call it, is we are focused on deploying that capability in program of record infrastructure. So now you're talking TSI, GDP, DDSM, the installation support node, infrastructure that is already managed as part of a program of record. Integrating with program of record infrastructure has proven to be very valuable in the experience for the infrastructure. Yes, we still need to innovate and build out new capability, but now we're starting to focus on the newer dynamics of the experimentation, things that people and organizations, commands, PMs aren't really focused on during the experimentation. Data costs a whole lot of money. Storing data costs even more amount of money. At the edge, storing petabytes of data is, yes. So, what data do we need to store? What data do we need to process? That is some of the questions that were asked of me. Going back to the DCO realm, or the cyber realm, cyber domain, a lot of similar data is represented between CSSP activities and DCO activities. So how do we then filter down the mass volume of DCO or CSSP data to help us to answer the operational or information, the commander's information requirements? So those are some of the testing and experimentation that we've done. So over the past 3 years, we said, I need infrastructure. Great. Deploying program of record in the program of record infrastructure on both the PEO IEWS side and the PEO C3T side. So now that we're looking and we've got deployed a common data platform in both as a big data platform in the cloud and at the edge, what we're now able to do is start focusing on the data aspects. What data do we actually need to pull in? I hear when people say, we need PCAP. Yes. Your data, your disk, your volume drives are going to get filled up very fast. And guess you will provide your own denial of service on your infrastructure. Happens all the time. This is both in the LAN and the cyber domain. So with that, part of that data aspect is, how do we actually enforce zero trust into the data? It's very often that we will see that the data for DCO at a tactical edge is very similar to the data that we're trying to see at the operational level. So tactical being core below, operational being ASCC to core, and then enterprise being everything that ASCC and above. So as we start looking at how do we and what data should we make available, common question I get, part of the project convergence exercises or other experimentation, we will build out a cool data product, an application, an analytic, or something that's deployed as a microservice or a container in the lightweight analytic platform. We will deploy it, and then as it's deployed, now the question says, well, we want the output of that to support operations. That output is data-driven, and of the data-driven output, We're starting to call that now in the newer terms a data product. So of that data product, how can we now help to inform an operational organization, an operational user? Could be a S6, could be an S3, could be a SEMA cell, could be a CSSP. How can we start to evaluate if we're producing the right outputs to inform operations? And so as we've migrated over the past 4-ish years that we've been working this experimentation, we've slowly been migrating in a path where it's really just the path of least resistance, much like water. What we're starting to see now is everybody wants the data. So how can we enforce the zero trust the enforcement of zero trust on the data? We actually have a way to do that inside of the lightweight analytic platform, LTAC, not just on the data, but also on the users and the capabilities that are deployed inside of it. And so does the DCO defender need to see the weather data that's coming in to the tactical server infrastructure via the TDP? Great question. In the TDP and in LAP, we're able to, in the same infrastructure, same software, same data platform, segregate that so that only the DCO users see the DCO data and all the operational users will see the weather data. While that's helpful, how does that actually get towards helping a commander make a decision faster? And so that's kind of where the experimentation is heading next for data-driven decision-making, and where we're moving out with for the next probably 12 months. What specific DCO data is going to help inform the requirement so that we can spin it back into the ACM, and then we can get that developed and written into the capability documents so that we're able to get after actually updating the necessary doctrine and policy to help inform where we're actually moving out. So hopefully that answered most of the questions on the experimentation. We'll be jumping around theaters over the next 8 to 12 months to continue to experiment and move out. Key points there is just saying it again. You need infrastructure, you need data, and both of those need to help the operational user. Over.
Thank you for your insight, Colonel Trevino. Yeah, just to alibi that. So, I've been in briefings before with General Standings. I always asked about, PCAP, and obviously you can't. There's a way to do the instance of that PCAP, but you can't. There's no possible way to bring all of that at the tactical edge because there's not enough pipe. So that's why through the experimentation we can actually probably parse that data and look at the IOCs, use the analytic tools to identify what's important. Not the weather, but what's actually, what is there an IOC in there? Is there an MCA in there? That's how we can parse it that way. That's what we're working towards, to do that data-driven. And we're actually doing working groups now with ForceCom G6 to try and get after it, because right now there's a little disconnect because we work on DCO platform tools, right, basically at division and above, right? We have the GDP at the regional hub node. We have some cases the DDSM will be deployed at the tactical edge because it's deployed for hunt forward missions. But the TSI stacks now are moving from brigade. As I mentioned, the TDI, because the TSI stacks are moving from brigade to division, the TDI, where the LAP sits on, is actually moving with the TSI stack. So now we have to look at how can we get that same data driven at the tactical edge. And I appreciate Colonel Trevino for leading those efforts, because it's very critical. We can't do this unless we just actually test it out with, that's why we do all these operational assessments, these experiments, these exercises, so we can look at, what our right and left limits are and how we can improve it. And that'll drive us as requirements for the ACM on writing and rewriting that capability drop, that CD or where it have to be ISCD, where we can put it in the write-up so when it gets sent for approval. Right now, the LAP is actually going, we're trying to get a staffing date because we still need signature authorities to be signed by General Stan's now we got Major General Janovic, so we're looking to get that signed off. But at the same time, we're still moving forward because as one of my favorite generals, General Crystal used to say that I worked for, he said, you know, action at the speed of war, we can't keep up, like Colonel Trevino said. A lot of this technology, what's current now, is already passed in 6 months. So we have to keep getting after it. And I mentioned stakeholders, so our cyber is a huge stakeholder for us, but even the program manager is a huge stakeholder for us too. And they actually are currently testing and integrating this LAP capability. Our PM DCO, they're staffed the requirements based on the capability drop. They're leaning forward with testing and capability on our DCO platforms right now. And I mentioned the DDSM kits. We just completed operational assessments, and it got completed in March of this year. And then that drives the version 1 Echo and the version 2. We actually had ATEC, which is the Army Test and Evaluation Command. They actually did an AER report and test results, and that came out in April. So the PM is one of our crucial stakeholders that push that forward and move it forward, and now they're currently working on the GDP. And I mentioned earlier that we're actually working on a ever assessment already with the DDSM and the DCO tools kit right now. In closing, I just want to thank everyone for your attention. You know, this is I'm a former CPB, so Cyber Protection Brigade, and so it's kind of nice being on the other side. Like, I worked on those tools, now being on the other side and trying to have my little piece of the pie of influence to try and sphere of influence to try and look at new technologies, emerging technologies to help the warfighters, and working on tools that I worked on, and now seeing the growth of like even the DDSM moving from the DDI to the DDSM to the version 1 Echo to the version 2. It's refreshing, and that's what ACM does. We look at the requirements and we base it on the capability needs of the warfighter. And I hope that answers all of your questions as far as understanding the context of what our roles are. Thank you very much. And I'm open for questions, by the way. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. So that's a good question. Actually, one of my many briefings with General Stanley actually asked that same question. So we are actually, that's why that C2 fix is that division and below. So we're actually, that's why we're having working groups with FORCECOM G6 now to get after it. And I think Colonel Trevino mentioned coinciding with that is the zero trust architecture too, with the C2 fix and C2 next. So we're, it is still in the works, but we're trying to get after it. Colonel Trevino, you have more to add on that? Oh.
So C2 fix, division below, next gen C2 is a separate thread. And so what was asked was, can we provide a capability that allows you to deploy microservices, containers, applications analytics through a modern DevSecOps environment in currently program of record provided infrastructure. So we're not, my focus with experimentation has not been to focus on C2 fix or to focus on Next Gen C2. It's been to focus on how can we get the requirements so the ACM is able to receive them from the operational user, and we're able to do this rapidly through experimentation and exercises and testing and data validation. And so, where does it fit? In the cyber domain, it's deployed as an analytic capability to deploy microservice or a microservice architecture and analytic application inside of that zero trust environment in program of record infrastructure right now. And then in the LAN domain, where we were looking at what data do we need, it's there too. We're not trying to do C2 fix or C2 next. We're focused on the operational requirement so that we can feed that back into the Army's requirements generation process. And the aim is to speed up the capability of development. So while those environments are available and they're being worked on, we're focused on, in the cyber domain, how can we just do this faster?
Any other questions? Okay.
Yes. So we're talking integration of capabilities through DevSecOps. It is in the cyber domain.
Oh, yes. Phone a friend, you know?
Yeah, our focus is to see, like, we are moving out in that direction in the cyber domain. In the LAN domain, we're acting as essentially like, we are advising the Army into some context. But cyber domain, cool.
Oh, we're good?